Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples Integrated Recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. If you've ever found yourself asking, why do I keep ending up here over and over again with relationships, this one is probably for you. Same chemistry, same intensity, same early hope, same being drawn to somebody that you know is probably bad for you, and the same collapse. Most people assume that when this happens, it's because they are missing a red flag or chose the wrong person or that they haven't done enough healing, and that explanation feels reasonable, especially if you have some self-awareness or you're thoughtful or genuinely trying to do better. But it doesn't actually explain the pattern, because the pattern keeps repeating even though you think that you're doing the work. And what I have come to believe is that people aren't failing at love because they're broken or unlucky. They are failing because they're operating from a completely wrong model of how attraction and connection actually work. Many of us are taught, directly or indirectly, that if we want love, we need to manage ourselves. We have to be more confident or be more appealing, less emotional. Don't text that you miss the person when you just, have only had a couple of dates. Be less complicated. Don't ask for too much. Don't show your cards too soon. Don't scare somebody off. And authenticity in this model is something that you think that you earn the right to later, like after interest is secured, after attraction is locked in, and after the relationship feels stable for them to tolerate the real you. So people adapt. They present the best version of themselves, the regulated version, the socially efficient version, and the version that won't cost them connection. Sometimes that works, at least at first. There's attraction, chemistry, momentum, that intoxicating feeling of being wanted, but few people talk about the cost of getting there this way. Because here's what matters. The less authentic that you are at the beginning, the more likely you are to attract somebody who requires you to stay that way. That's not about bad luck, that's alignment. So, if you are suppressing your sensitivity, you're going to attract people who don't know what to do with that. If you downplay your needs, then you're going to attract people who benefit from not meeting them. And if you perform confidence instead of inhabiting it, then you're going to attract people who relate to you as an image rather than a person. Then, later, when the real parts inevitably surface, people are going to feel confused. One feels like they were maybe misled, or the other feels like suddenly they're too much. And then the relationship starts to fracture under the weight of something that was never actually named. And this is where shame can become part of the picture. Shame doesn't attach to what's broken, it attaches to what was exposed without protection. The parts of you that feel risky to show aren't risky because they're wrong. They're risky because at some point, showing them cost you something. Maybe that was approval, safety, belonging, emotional connection, and you learned implicitly or explicitly that those parts were not convenient for somebody else or that they were excessive or unwelcome. And with this, your nervous system adapts. It learns what to hide, what to manage, what to translate into something that might be more acceptable. And that adaptation helped you survive. In fact, it probably helped you succeed. But it also reorganized attraction in ways that a lot of people don't realize. Because when you hide the most alive parts of yourself, you don't just protect yourself from pain, you lose access to a critical internal signal. You lose the ability to feel who is actually capable of meeting you. Instead of attraction being guided by safety and resonance, it starts organizing around intensity, around people who are exciting, probably unpredictable or maybe even out of reach. People who activate your longing, anxiety, and hope all at once. Dopamine firing all over the place, and of course, it is an intoxicating chemical dump. And that kind of attraction feels very powerful and meaningful, like something important is happening. But often what's really happening is just an old pattern that's being reactivated. You're not being pulled towards love, you're being pulled toward what feels familiar, toward emotional terrain that your nervous system has already kind of figured out how to navigate. Even if that terrain is not stable, it takes a ton of effort or it's very painful. And this is why people can be deeply attracted to partners who don't treat them well, don't see them for who they are, can't show up consistently, while feeling indifferent toward partners who are actually steady, kind, and emotionally available. It's not because healthy love is too boring, it's because unhealed attraction systems are very loud. And when those systems are running the show, authenticity alone won't save you. You can be open, expressive, emotionally literate, but still end up in relationships that slowly hollow you out. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're choosing from a model that confuses activation with connection. And that is the problem that we have to name before anything else makes sense. So let's move into the physics of attraction and why chemistry is lying. Once you understand that attraction can organize around familiarity rather than with what is actually healthy, a lot of confusing relationship history starts to make sense. Most people think that attraction is a single thing, like either you feel it or you don't. But in practice, attraction runs on two very different systems, and they produce radically different outcomes. The first system is attraction through deprivation. This is the kind of attraction that most people mistake for chemistry because it's loud, it's urgent, and it pulls your attention away from yourself and toward the other person. You think more about them than you mean to. You might replay conversations or start looking for signs and wondering where things stand. Usually, this other person is inconsistent. Maybe not overtly rejecting, but not fully available either. They give just enough to keep hope alive. And that partial availability does something very powerful to the nervous system. It creates activation. And activation feels like aliveness. It feels like desire. It feels like something important is at stake. But what's actually happening is that your nervous system is mobilizing to secure connection. It's scanning, adjusting, self-monitoring, and it's working hard. That work and the dopamine that is surrounding all of it can feel very intoxicating, especially if you learned early in life that closeness had to be earned or managed. If love was unpredictable, conditional, or emotionally expensive, your system learned to associate activation with attachment. So, when deprivation shows up in adult relationships, it feels familiar, magnetic, compelling, intoxicating. And this is why someone can be drawn again and again to partners who are emotionally unavailable, self-absorbed, inconsistent, even while knowing intellectually it will not end well. That attraction isn't coming from choice, it's coming from your nervous system wiring and conditioning. The second system works very differently, and this attraction is through inspiration. It's quieter and it doesn't hijack your attention. It doesn't flood your system with urgency. Instead, it produces a sense of steadiness and grounding and ease. You feel more like yourself around this person, not less like yourself. Your thoughts aren't racing. Your body isn't bracing for impact or always wondering. You're not always trying to read between the lines or figure out where things stand. And for many people, especially with attachment wounds, that feels very unfamiliar, because inspiration-based attraction doesn't feel like drama. It doesn't create that mental obsession and replaying. It doesn't create a super emotional high and then a dump and a low that people have been taught to associate with passion. So it feels kind of dismissed, like there was no spark, or that it's flat, or that you didn't feel pulled. But what you're actually noticing is the absence of activation. And then people interpret that absence as a lack of attraction rather than a sign of safety. This is where chemistry lies, because chemistry doesn't tell you if somebody is good for you. It tells you if somebody is activating your nervous system or not. Sometimes that activation comes from genuine desire and compatibility, but often, probably more often, it comes from unresolved attachment patterns and unexamined emotional learning. And this is why authenticity alone isn't enough. You can be honest, you can be emotionally open, you can share your inner world. And if your attraction system is still wired around deprivation, then you will keep feeling pulled toward people who cannot meet you and pushing away people who probably can and want to. And this is where a lot of advice goes wrong, because people are encouraged to be vulnerable. I mean, I tell clients all the time in the office, couples, to be vulnerable or to open up, to be real, without being taught how to evaluate what happens on the other side of that openness, without being taught how to discern whether vulnerability is going to be received with care, curiosity, and respect, or simply consumed. Because vulnerability without discernment is not brave, it's risky. I'm not saying not to open up to people, I'm saying you need to evaluate. When people get hurt after being vulnerable, many draw the wrong conclusion. They tell themselves that they were too open, too trusting, too emotional, and then they say, never again. They pull back, they armor up, they become more controlled, more guarded, and more strategic. The issue was not vulnerability. It was the absence of a filter. The work isn't for you to shut down being open. It's that you must develop a way of evaluating who openness actually belongs to. And this is where a crucial shift has to happen, from being oriented around whether you're being desired to being oriented around whether you feel safe. Because attraction through inspiration does not announce itself loudly. It doesn't override your judgment, and it doesn't feel urgent. It grows through consistency, presence, and emotional generosity. And if you're not trained to value those qualities, then you will probably miss them, or worse, feel actively uninterested in them. Some people say that they are addicted to chaos, or that they find themselves drawn to unavailable partners as if it's a personality trait. And it's not. It is conditioning. And conditioning can be reworked. You can always retrain your brain, you can retrain your nervous system, but it takes time. It's doing the work. And only if you stop letting chemistry being your deciding factor. That's where the next shift matters so much, because without it, even insight is just another way for you to rationalize familiar choices. The real question is not whether you feel pulled towards someone, it's what that pull is actually made of. So, let's move into choosing instead of being chosen. Because here's where everything changes. Up until this point, most people are still subtly oriented around being chosen by someone else, even if they are self-aware, even if they are doing the work, even when they believe that they are being discerning. They still ask questions like, does he like me? Am I attractive enough? Am I too much? Am I doing the right thing? That orientation puts you in a reactive position. You are monitoring, adjusting, interpreting, managing. And as long as that's happening, your nervous system, not your values, is in charge. The shift happens when the primary question changes. No longer, does he want me? Does she want me? Do they want me? But instead, do I feel safe and seen and valued by this person? That question is probably deceptively simple, but if you ask it honestly, it reorganizes everything. And it feels awful when your system is organized around chaos and you know that you're drawn and attracted to this toxic partner, but you also know that you don't feel safe and you don't feel chosen. Do you feel intact in their presence, or do you feel like you are potentially braced for something to happen? Do you feel grounded when you spend time together, or do you feel unsettled? Do you feel like you're becoming more of yourself, or you're editing yourself? If you feel energized but diminished, that is not attraction. That's anxiety with hope. When people start using this question consistently, something surprising can happen. Certain people will lose their pull pretty quickly, not because the person suddenly became unattractive, but because the internal organizing principle changes. You're not scanning for validation, you're looking for safety. That's the crux of everything. And safety doesn't mean comfort or predictability or lack of challenge. It means that your nervous system doesn't have to stay on high alert to maintain connection. It means that you're not performing or monitoring or bracing for that withdrawal. This is where a lot of people get confused and think that they need to become more guarded or harder or less open in order to protect themselves. And that's not the right move. The difference isn't armor, it's a spine. Armor is defensive. It shuts things out indiscriminately. A spine is organizing. It allows you to stay open while remaining upright. When you know the value of your core gifts, the parts of you that are tender, alive, emotionally rich, and giving, you stop offering them everywhere. Not because you're ashamed of them, but because you know their worth. and that understanding changes how you move. You leave sooner if something feels off, you recover faster when something ends, and you tolerate far less emotional ambiguity and BS. Not because you're cynical, but because you're clear. Creatures without a spine need armor, but creatures with a spine don't. Dating culture doesn't teach this. It teaches you how to be appealing, revealing, sexy, how to not be selective. It rewards detachment, emotional minimalism, and replaceability. Treats connection like it's a marketplace rather than a relational process. And yet, when people across cultures and genders are asked what they want in a long-term partner, the answers are pretty consistent. Kindness, understanding, goodness, not dominance or status or emotional withholding. We're trained to optimize what's loud, not what lasts. And this applies just as much if you're already in a relationship. Being seen doesn't happen accidentally. It requires asking, real asking, clean asking, without resentment and without apology. Most people don't ask for what they need because they are ashamed of wanting it. They tell themselves that maybe they should be more self-sufficient or more evolved or less needy. And when they don't ask, something corrosive happens. They start believing that their partner wouldn't give it to them anyway. That belief erodes intimacy, creates distance, not because a partner is incapable, but because the request was never dignified enough to be made. Asking is not selfish, it's generous, and it gives your partner a chance to show up or to reveal their limits. And either way, it's information. Both give you clarity. Healthy love isn't found by becoming more impressive, more desirable, more strategically appealing, or more sexy from reps at the gym. It is found by being real and discerning at the same time. The question isn't whether or not you are lovable. The question is if you are willing to stop chasing toxic people who require you to disappear in order to stay. And that is the shift. That is where healthy love actually begins. And that is doing the work. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.